So we're going to start by finishing up the uh, uh, the chapter called "The Human Brain." There's only one paragraph left of that, so let's do that.
In addition, while our genetic preens have provided our brains with free space wherein future memes can be stored, it appears they have not given the conscious part of our brains direct control of their removal. While our memes may eventually be forgotten, we cannot hasten that process using volition alone. This may have important implications in psychology, see DTD, how the brain captures memes.
Okay, and so that I think is an important observation. So I decided that we should take a detour and actually read how the brain captures memes. Okay, and one of the importances here, uh, important points of this detour is that if you think back on how, say, early sociologists or early psychiatrists or uh, thought about the brain, what could they think about it? That is to say, basically, they had no knowledge of it or how it works, I would say. Um, so, for example, Freud comes up with his theory of psychology, ego, id, and all that. He does that largely in the dark about what's really going on in the brain. But we have the advantage of now almost 100 years of computer science. And the brain's a computer, at least that's the view of preen theory. And we know a lot about computer science. And so we can now use this modern understanding to enhance our knowledge about certain aspects of what the brain does, why it does it, and how it does it. So that's what this detour is going to be about.
Detour how your brain captures memes. Memes may be acquired from nature via our senses. They may also be acquired from parents, friends, teachers, authors, actors, musicians, political parties, governments, religions, etc. using tools such as speech, print, television, and the internet, by techniques called education, indoctrination, brainwashing, enlightenment, entertainment, training, advertising, propaganda, etc. There are also some memes that are not acquired from the outside but are created within your brain when it processes the memes it already has. These sets of memes can be called experiential memes, cultural memes, and created memes, respectively. The outside world is awash with preens for your brain to capture and store. How come your brain captures some and ignores others?
So let's discuss that. Does the brain capture some of the some preens and not others? Maybe I should work on that language. But right, does everything, for example, when you look out in the world, is it all stored in your brain? Every little aspect of it?
And I guess it depends on like what kind of storage you're talking about. So first off, okay, when you say everything, like let's limit it to the things that we're perceiving because obviously we don't see what happens behind like things we can't see.
That's an
Um,
excellent point.
but so for our limited definition of everything, and then also like in terms of storage, like if we're perceiving it, yes, it goes into our brain, so it's like sort of stored transiently, but then I think there's like a separate process where it like goes into some kind of long-term storage. So like the example we would use in psychology in like high school is they say like, do you remember what you ate for breakfast this morning? that information was in your brain at some point, but it's probably not useful, so you probably discarded it pretty quickly.
Well, okay. So I'm not sure. I like your point, but I'm not even sure I subscribe to that. How many pixels are in the image you're seeing that I just blanked out of me, right? Now, I'm not sure that all those pixels and all their gradations actually ever get into our brain at all. But but and when we're out in the real world, I'm not sure how many photons are hitting our eyes. Uh, do they actually um, all of them leave a mark? I don't know. You raise a very good point, and I don't have an answer. But I do agree with you that some of the stuff that our brain captures is very quickly dispensed with. And certainly as computer scientists, we understand that there's all sorts of memory devices available. You can have volatile devices or non-volatile devices that store information. Okay, so it's a good observation, Ryan, and it's a computer scientist's observation, I would say. Okay, but whatever's correct, our brain seems to ignore some of the things that we perceive. Let's put it that way. Okay, I'm back. All right. So, given that, um, how come our brain does that? How come our brain records some things and doesn't record others, or at least doesn't put them in very long storage? Why would that be that it would do that? So why doesn't it just keep, this in? Why do I have to post this stuff on YouTube? Why isn't your brain remembering every aspect of this lecture? William.
There is limited space in the brain. You can't remember everything.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Uh, do we have the capacity to remember everything? Probably it's just a guess. We don't. Yeah. Um, so what should the brain do given that situation?
It should selectively forget certain things.
Yes, right? So it's going to put certain things in long-term memory, and a lot of the things, other things, never make it into long-term memory. Okay. But that means that the brain has to be programmed, it seems, to figure out which ones it's going to put in the long-term memory and which one is not. Yes? So if you were programming a robot to get along in the real world, to move around and all these things, how would you make those decisions?
Uh, Maximize expected utility. Um, so I guess you need some way of predicting how useful a piece of information will be in the future.
Yes, totally agree with you. Yeah. So you need some way of making that prediction. Mm, So now the question is, you got your robot and you need some way. Mm, how are you going to go about it? I mean, what is the way you might do that?
It's a guess, but I think it might be related to like sort of the internal reward function. Like, so your brain has like dopamine and serotonin, which I think are analogous to like the reward function in like reinforcement learning. Um, so I think your like maximizing expected utility is like along the lines of like maximizing expected dopamine. So then you like purge things in a way that will, in expectation, maximize that, I guess. I don't know. That's like a guess.
Yeah, no, it is a guess, and not a bad one, which is to say, much like my guess. Okay. Um, Nathan Johnson.
Oh, on a kind of related note, I was thinking of the idea like you have, I think we were talking about like a child who puts their hand on the stove.
Yes.
And as a kind of related point to maximizing dopamine, it's also minimizing kind of pain, however you want to categorize that or quantize that.
hmm hmm Yeah. Well, you guys are, among the best programmers and computers scientists in the world. You're in the, top 1% or better. So if I asked you to program a robot to do these kind of things, you'd have to figure out how to do it well, right? Whatever it is. So here's my answer.
Way before brains showed up, organisms had evolved stimulus/response systems which could detect some changes in the environment and initiate useful responses when detection occurred. For example, some bacteria sense the concentration of chemicals in their environment and when desirable chemicals are detected, respond by moving to a location of higher concentration. Once brains existed, they could be incorporated into these stimulus/response systems. Presumably, the brain could process the information it was receiving from sensors and induce responses. Under appropriate conditions, the response would include turning on the meme recorder and capturing memes. But what are the appropriate conditions?
Okay, so you got this meme recorder, and this is a reiteration of the question we're asking. What are the appropriate conditions where you're going to turn it on? Yes. And so I use an example. The example involves this guy. Surprise.
Let's say I come to your home, knock 3 times, and, when you open the door, I release a lion. Let's further assume that you actually survive. I'll bet you will never forget that day, smile.
Okay. You're not going to forget that, right? And
In fact, you can't afford to forget. You must remember what happened and make sure that it does not happen again. You must turn on the meme recorder and create memories.
okay. So what
Lenote, what memories will you record?
so this guy showed up at your door and attacked you, but you survived. What will you remember about this event? That is what will get recorded in the meme recorder.
Like what led up to it and how it happened.
Anthony, yes. Uh, and you hit on a very important point. So I think clearly you're going to remember something about the attack, right? You're going to remember, the size of that animal's teeth or something. You're going to remember uh, what you did, what the animal did before, after he showed up, right? Okay, but as Anthony points out, you're also going to remember things that happened before the animal showed up. Remember, I walked up to your door and I knocked 3 times. That's the story. And you didn't know about the lion until after you opened the door. So, but that information is in your short-term memory, even though it's now historical information. But it could be very important in planning your future behavior. So I would say you're going to store information like 3 times there was a knock. You might even store information about what smells or sounds you heard prior to getting to the door. Even though they're historical, they might still be in short-term memory. Yes? That makes sense to me, at least. Okay.
The recorder will save valuable information about what happened after the appearance of the lion, how big he was, how big his teeth were, how he moved, how you moved, who was present, etc. Information prior to the appearance of the lion may also be important. What sounds were heard? What smells were in the air? So, the content of short-term memory, or it is likely such information is stored, may be re-recorded into less volatile long-term memory. As an aside, perhaps such memory dumps help explain the ultra-high resolution, slow motion, recollections that are sometimes reported following serious mishaps, possibly excluding some that involve direct injury to the brain.
Okay, so there is this phenomenon that's often recorded or mentioned that when very serious mishaps occur, people seem to remember in sort of vivid detail what happened, a kind of slow motion, high resolution image of that stuff. And so I'm wondering, does this meme recorder recording historical data that it wouldn't normally retain, it's in short-term memory, it would normally just be gone shortly, but instead it's retained. Is that why people can have these vivid, detailed memories of traumatic events? I don't know, but it seems to me a reasonable hypothesis. Anybody have other views? Okay, let me see here. Okay, I'd like to get a little discussion going here.
I think I might have something.
Yes, Caleb,
So,
Khalid.
sorry, my camera's broken. I can't use it. But could you
Okay.
argue that a traumatic experience is not regular? So it's something that the brain probably hasn't seen before. Therefore, it's going to store into long-term memory so that once it happens again, I'll be more familiar with it.
Well, wait a minute. So, um, that it hasn't seen before. No, I don't think I'm in line with what you're saying, but let's discuss it. Um, for example, in this story, I knocked 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Well, I think you've heard 3 knocks on a door before. It's not that unusual. So, in terms of that being familiar or not, I think it's quite familiar. It's
Well,
the
that
event
part's.
that happened. Huh?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, Caleb, please.
Oh, so like that part is normal. I think everyone's done that before, but you're not expecting a lion to be there and you'll be shocked by that. So whenever you knock on a door 3 times, you'll think about that event because it made such an impact because it's not a regular thing that happens.
Yes, that is what I'm saying. I'm saying
Okay.
that normally when people knock 3 times, nothing important happens when you open the door, in which case the short-term memory that you're sort of running as life goes by just gets replaced and never put in long-term memory. However, when an important event happens, like the lion, then the meme recorder pulls that information that it has in short-term memory and restores it in less volatile memory, um, in anticipation of using that information later to plan future behavior. That that work for you or no?
Yeah, that makes sense. Right.
Okay. Um, any other comments?
I have a comment.
Yes,
I I
Martino.
I agree with this kind of scenario-based encoding hypothesis.
Hmm?
And I also think it aligns with kind of what we're taught in psychology with classical conditioning. Because, for example, when you have a stimulus that is a neutral stimulus, for example, knocking on a door, it doesn't elicit any form of, fight or flight response from the person. But if you were to hear 3 times knocking on your door, open it and see a lion, then it can become a conditioned stimulus, which in the future, if somebody knocks on your door 3 times, suddenly you start having parasympathetic nervous system activity and you start sweating, your palms, get clammy. So obviously, nothing has changed between before and after the lion. The knocks are still the same, but the
Mhm.
human response to it is different. So that's another kind of a piece of example for this sort of physiological memory.
Yes, I like it, Martino, and I didn't relate it to the famous, dog experiments that were done by Pavlov. I guess that's the guy we think of. And but yes, I like it very much. This is that kind of thing, I would say. But um, Pavlov's situation is kind of interesting, and we should explore it, I think, because um, in Pavlov's case, as I recall, he measured, you know, saliva or something production as an indication. Okay, so uh, it was not as if the dog's brain, perhaps it was not as if the dog's brain processed the information and then planned future behavior to include salivating when, the bell or whatever the stimulus was. Famously, the stimulus was what? When he rang a bell, right?
Yeah, he would feed the dogs when he rang the bell.
Yes. And so inside the dog's brain, I do think that the post-bell uh, events did lead to a change in future behavior when he heard the bell. That is, getting fed made him start to salivate. But in that case, I'm not sure what processing went on in the dog's brain and whether it's the same as probably goes on in a human brain. I don't know. You raise a good question here.
I
And
I think this is interesting too because in the case of the dogs, it was a reward that was causing this association to be encoded into their brain. Whereas
mhm.
in the case we're talking about with the lion, it's trauma. And it would be interesting to know whether those two things work through similar pathways,
Uh,
or not.
yes, and as we'll see very shortly, uh, I believe there's basically no difference in those two things. Okay. Uh, hang on a minute. Let me. Yeah, I don't think there's a difference, or not an important difference. Obviously, there's a difference. Okay. Um, yes. So I think this is very much related to Pavlovian stuff, and I think those are good observations. All right.
Your brain may later process the newly captured memes to improve future behavior. Perhaps your future physical behavior will include running the next time you see me. Perhaps your future emotional behavior will include feelings of anxiety when hearing 3 knocks on the door.
Right? I mean, this is what we're talking about. But notice that now when you hear 3 knocks on the door, let's assume you do have feelings of anxiety, right? That shows us that the events that happened that day were stored in your brain, which made them memes, whatever part of it you did store. And you went around and you created memes from it that led you to have, for example, possibly feelings of anxiety when hearing 3 knocks on the door. Yes? So that's created memes that are doing that. Okay, but it shows us that the lion event not only allowed you to sort of program your future physical behavior, it also allowed you to program your future emotional behavior. So now memes not only impact your physical behavior, they also impact your emotional response to the world. Yes? You follow this? I think it's an important point. That is, the memes in your head clearly, from what we've said, will impact your future physical behavior. For example, the memes in your head will determine how you're going to vote next time if you vote, right? But this is saying they'll also impact your future emotional behavior. And that's perhaps a very important thing to keep in mind. And we'll see more examples of this. Yes, Anthony.
So
Anthony.
say you repress some memories and like you kind of like forget about the trauma in a way. Is that still gonna be a meme, or is that not gonna be a meme?
Okay, so yeah, so I don't know. I think that repressed memories almost certainly do not make the stored memes go away. I think that's very likely the case. They don't make the memes go away. What repression is I suspect that you have acquired other memes subsequent to the lion attack, for example, or your existing memes before the lion attack uh, are so they are fighting it out for your behavior. That is for your conscious mind in this case. And your other memes that you had before or after the lion attack may work to keep it out of your consciousness, but it has not gone away. It's still there because that would require removing it from these memory devices. And as we'll see later, I don't think we are given by our genes the ability to do that. All right. So that's my point of view on that. Ryan, please.
So you mentioned like a distinction between like uh when you have an emotional response that's like affected by an experience versus like, it changes your emotional response versus changing your physical response. Um,
Mhm.
is that so big of a difference if your emotional response probably also just indirectly affects your physical response. And technically, I think your emotional response only matters in so much as it affects your physical response.
Uh, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but but with regard to is that so important? I think it's hugely important, okay, that memes, the things you get in your head, affect your emotions. Okay, I think it's hugely important, and we'll eventually get to that pretty soon, as a matter of fact. And I think it's very interesting how much of an impact your memes have on your emotions. In fact, I will hypothesize later or introduce the possibility that when you're born, well, let me back up a little bit. So this is going to be a bit of a soliloquy, but I want to answer your question why I think these things are important. Okay. When you're born, you probably, and of course there's exceptions to this, you probably had arms, legs, heads, eyes, muscles of various sorts, right? And those physical things that are you, the physical part of you, um, uh, have a lot to do with your behavior. So, for example, uh, you may think you can fly, but you can't. Okay. You don't have the repertoire of possible physical behaviors you can engage in is not unlimited. I mean, of course, we can build planes, but that's not what I'm talking about, right? You can't fly. Yes, because you don't have the repertoire of to fly. Now, then there's the question of what is your emotional repertoire? That is, you can't have emotions that aren't part of your repertoire, is what I'm saying. For example, you can feel happiness, disappointment, a lot of things. By the way, it's very hard to give good words to these things we feel. But anyway, okay, you can feel depression, yeah, right? But you have a repertoire, um, I think, of emotions that you are born with. Okay. And here's an important point of this soliloquy. Those emotions that you're born with are not attached to anything. So happiness, sadness, depression, whatever you want to call your emotions, you're born with a repertoire of possible feelings you can have, but they are not associated with a thing. Okay. And it's only through your life that memes get associated with your emotions. Yes. So let me give you an example. Uh, and like I say, oh, okay. Let me give you this example. If I show you Vladimir Putin, a picture I put up on there. Um, okay. Uh, if you're born in this country, America, for example, uh, are you going to have an emotional response to Putin?
From birth?
Huh?
From birth?
None at all. Right. I think we can agree. But now, yes.
After my experiences, yes.
Yes. Okay. Now, if you're born in America and you see this picture that I have of Vladimir Putin, you may have negative emotions towards him. That would be typical if you're born in America. Yes. But if you're born in Russia, same picture, what is likely to be your emotional response?
I would say more complex. Because I think some of them are like I think a lot of Russians do like genuinely like him, but I think also there are a lot of Russians that like genuinely don't, but are like conditioned to anyway. So I think there may be like some conflicted feelings.
Sure. And if I hold up a picture of Trump, do you think there'll be conflicting feelings among Americans?
Definitely.
Exactly. So when I hold up a picture of Putin in Russia, I suspect you get a conflicting feelings, but you probably get much more uh, greater number of Americans who see that to have negative feelings. Yes? All right. So how come? Well, it's because these negative feelings weren't attached to something, anything, when you were born. You had a repertoire of them, but they were attached to nothing. Now, on the other hand, as you grew up, they became attached to things like your feelings when you see a picture of Trump, your feelings when you see a picture of Putin. Yes? So your feelings towards things is not innate, it appears. It is acquired in the same way all sorts of memes are acquired. So too, those memes you acquire affect your feelings. And that's why I think it's a very important point to make here. Move that around a little bit. Oh, Creedy. Sorry, I missed you for a while.
You're
Yeah.
good. I just had a quick thought. I don't know if it adds to anything, but
Mhm.
like as a response to the lion attack, could you just learn to look through your door's peephole before opening your door? Like from then on,
Oh,
whether
you.
there's like three
Oh,
knocks or not, but
I'll bet you that's yes.
yeah.
You might, once you process what happened,
Hmm.
come up with all sorts of changes in your future behavior.
Hmm.
That is to say, yeah, all sorts of changes,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And you know, in the case of something that's really traumatic, life-threatening, you may shape your whole life around that event. Okay. Your future responses to virtually anything, all things may be modified by a single event, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Uh, Nathan.
I just wanted to ask one clarifying question. So we're talking
Okay,
about
just one.
how just one. So we talked about how emotions can be emotions are learned, right? They're
No,
acquired
no,
through the same.
emotions are given to you at birth. What they're associated with, and when you have those emotions, that is learned.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I want my question was along the lines of are emotions a preen? Like, are is there a preen of like I feel mad towards so and so political leader, or is it like so political leader did this, and then as a result, my brain's processing I feel have this emotion.
I think I think it's different than any of the uh, mechanisms you described. I think that the reason that what happens is you acquire cultural preens when you grow up. You now have a culture, you eventually have a cultural preen that says, and this gets to labels again implicitly, but you have a preen that tells you what physical objects are Putin. Okay. Now, you may see Putin in, sitting down, standing up, whatever, but you can say, oh, that thing over there, maybe sitting down, Putin, is part of my Putin preen, and I put labels on physical objects that say, is Putin or isn't Putin? Yes? Okay. Now, and we're going to get into this more later. What happens is that meme that you now possess, which is your Putin meme, and recognizes Putin in all sorts of positions and situations, because you say, oh, that's Putin, right? That peen has metadata. You guys know what metadata is. I'm actually checking to make sure I know what it is. It's data that's associated with data, right? That describes some piece of data you have in greater detail, one could say, or attributes of it. Okay. So too do preens have metadata. And that metadata can be very complex. For example, among the metadata associated with your Putin preen can be emotions. So you've acquired this Putin preen. That's Putin. That's not Putin, right? But it's got some metadata, and it's to put oversimplify, dislike, have negative emotions towards, or it might acquire like, have positive emotions. But what metadata it accumulates is going to depend on cultural preens you acquire. They can play with that metadata. Okay? So, so now, yes, Anthony. Oh, Acreedy. I don't know. Whichever of you were first, please go. And if you don't know, okay.
Uh,
Acreedy. Oh, no, Anthony.
Sorry,
so
I
I'm
forgot
kind
to
of
lower my hand. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
so I'm kind of confused. So you're saying like the difference between a preen and a meme is that the preen is just like a metadata kind of
No, no, no,
situation,
no,
or
no.
like
Please go on.
so I was just gonna say, like, can you just define it one more time of how they're different, or what's the definition between the both of the two of them?
Between a preen and metadata.
A preen
Is
and a
that
meme.
and a
A
meme?
preen.
Yes. Okay. Let's back it up a little bit. A preen is a non-physical object that can be stored in physical things. If you have a preen that is stored in the physical object Anthony Carrion, and more specifically, is stored in Anthony Carrion's brain, then we call it one of Anthony Carrion's memes, that preen. So memes is just a word that, okay, so we've decided that there's all these preens out there, and they can be stored in various physical things. But a physical thing can be storing lots of preens, one physical thing, like you, for example. And some of those preens may be stored in your brain. Yes? The ones stored in your brain we call Anthony Carrion's memes. So we use memes to mean we really should use it with respect to a given individual. Meme, Anthony Carrion's memes are the preens stored in Anthony Carrion's brain. That's a better way to say it. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So, these are your emotions, right? I'm saying they're not attached to anything. You just have a repertoire of them when you're born. They get attached to other things like memes in your head by the process of learning, that is to say, acquiring cultural preens from other places. There's other things that they may get attached to. I mean, other metadata that may get attached to your preens. Okay, so you guys probably know more about metadata than I do. So will someone give me a little, tutorial on metadata? I mean, it's a term used in computer science, right? Okay, so what does metadata mean, when you learn it as a computer scientist? I got all these incredibly educated, brilliant young computer scientists, and they can't tell me that. All right, Nathan, thank you. After I browbeat you guys to
It's a
answering.
bit funny. Just as you started the brow beating, I was going to raise my hand.
Oh, okay. All
I had
right.
to let you finish. Though at least I'm not sure about everyone else. The way I learned it was pretty similar to the way you did. You explained it in terms of data about data. Um,
Mhm.
maybe this is kind of like a document, right? This is the person associated with it, and this is the number of things. It's more of information about the information, maybe might have been the
Yes.
way.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. So for example, if it is a document, I might store with the document the number of kilobytes. That would be metadata about the document. Yes. Good. Okay. Thank you. All right. All right. So, can anybody think of a single emotion, any emotion that you have that you think is, well, no. Tell me about an emotional response that you have that seems genetically endowed. Are there any?
Fear?
Hmm. Huh?
Fear?
I was thinking about that. And yeah, so elaborate, Isabel, please.
Like, because it's like if you want to like avoid danger or something, I feel like fear is like a almost like a genetically programmed emotion to like make you avoid things.
Yeah, now, I I understand because I agree with you. Okay, so fear is a complicated one. Okay. I think we actually use the word fear in two different ways. That is, you may fear getting a bad grade in this course. Pretty unlikely, by the way, but you may fear it. Okay. Um, now, but you would also fear if any large, fast-moving object like a truck or a or an elephant was charging at you, right? And those may be different. Yes. Okay. Jose Luis Ambeta.
Ambite, ambite.
Ambite. Bite.
Let's pronounce
Bite.
every single letter. Um,
Oh, ambite.
um,
Okay.
um, so I'm following partly players, but it depending on your definition of emotion, but like a maternal attachment, I mean, certainly probably when newborns are born, something they attach to one particular human, generally their mother, although I know people that study primates and they do a kind of weird things with dolls and stuff like that. But that seems to be kind of, I don't know if it's genetic, but it's really kind of inborn in a sense that.
Well,
Attachment.
I thought about this, example as well. And okay, and so I disagree with you. That is, I think that that falls under the you can feel affection or whatever uh, for your mother. But much like the Darwinian thing that I mean the Descartes thing we're talking about, you don't feel affection for the person who's your mother. You feel affection for whatever person is around when you're born and begins to feed you and you make, physical contact with you. Yes. So
Yeah,
it
so,
very immediately gets tied to your mother, but it's not tied to that person. It's tied to whatever mother you have. And no two,
yeah,
yes?
I actually said, I was a bit careful. I said attachment, not affection. So I'm not an expert in emotion, so I don't know. That's why I said I prefaced my comment with it depends what you mean by emotion. But certainly animals do get attached, yeah, to whatever thing they see when they're born.
Yes, famously ducks and geese.
Yeah.
Imprinting, they call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
I don't feel super strongly about this one, so I have more to say.
okay, but I'm still looking for an example where we have emotions that are attached to something via genetic means, or do emotions only get attached to things, events, people, and like the like when after we're born and perhaps through a process. So we were discussing emotions and this idea that I have that emotions, you have a repertoire of emotions, but they're not attached to anything until you go through learning. So, and I was wondering if we knew of any exceptions to that. And I guess Isabel raised the question of fear. And I sort of think that the fear of failing this class and the fear of getting hit by a large moving object are just different, and we've given them the same names. Uh, so can anybody think of emotions that are associated with events that are not learned associations? Not
So,
sure. Yeah.
um, this may be a bit of a stretch, but if you consider sexual attraction to be like an emotion, which arguable, but maybe, I think I've heard that sexual attraction is like, or like sexual preferences is like a combination between like genetic and environmental. I'm not 100% sure though.
Yeah, so this gets us into a topic that I've thought about, which is, by the way, a topic, we do live in an actual society, and it is a topic which is, very important right now in the society we live in. And uh, so, uh, okay, so sexual preference. Um, is that an emotion? I I'm not sure it's an emotion. Right? I don't know. I do think that there's a genetic component to it, but I also do think that there's a cultural component to it. But okay. I don't know that it's an emotion. All right. Let me ask a different question. Assuming I'm right. Okay. Well, if I'm right, that these emotions that we are born with a repertoire of emotions and their attachment to physical things, including events, is determined by learning after we're born. Is that something as a psychologist or the field of psychiatry should know? What do you
I,
think?
I I feel like the emotions are, I can't think of an emotion that is like that you learn from before being born or whatever you want to say. But
Yeah,
like,
genetically endowed.
so I would say that like a reaction to the emotion maybe could be genetic as well, like something like that. Like when they say like for like a victory or like a good situation where like people throw their hands up, like that would be something that's genetic because like it's like a natural thing that people do, I guess. I remember learning about that.
Yeah, yeah. So Anthony, I hear you, but and I'm positing that when a a person feels victorious, or and maybe after an event which they call a victory, yes, that that feeling of being okay, that in our repertoire of emotions is uh, the feeling of being victorious, but it is not attached to an event until later. So if you go to a basketball game, let's say you're a Laker fan and they're playing Golden State. Okay. If the Lakers win, you might feel victorious. But what do the Golden State fans feel? Well, they feel defeated. Okay. And so I'm saying your feelings of victor, you have the capacity to feel victorious, then that's genetically endowed. But when you're going to express those feelings, feel actually victorious, is something you learned. You learned to be a Laker fan, or you learned to be a Golden State fan, etc. Yes. And the same thing is true about politics. A lot of people would have been on one side or the other in the recent presidential election, right? About half this country probably feel defeated, and about half feel victorious. They both were born with the capacity to feel either, but now they've been attached to various things. Okay, so all right, John Machado.
So I was thinking about this fear example that Isabel said, and I think it's a good example.
Mhm.
I have two kids, two young kids, and it's totally anecdotal, I know, but both of them, the first time we tried to put their feet on grass, they were very fearful.
Uh-huh.
And I think that might have something to do with the fear of the unknown because they had never touched grass.
Yes.
So, and I think that that was prior to the experience of actually feeling the grass and determining if that was positive or negative in terms of their, pleasure or, uh,
Yes.
yeah.
So Yeah, it's an interesting example. So, like I say, I'm sort of confused about fear in particular, because it may be that we're using the same word for two different things. Okay,
Right.
now let's take your kids. They, I believe, had a fear of the grass, and I believe their fear of the grass was probably genetically endowed. That's just my guess. Okay. However, um, then they experienced grass, and now they associated with grass positive emotions, I think.
Yeah, one one of them, yes, and the other one's too young. But yeah,
Okay.
I assume I hope he will.
Yes, yes. Welcome to being a parent, you know. If any of you have not tried that, I found it a highly rewarding experience. Okay. But at any rate, uh, yeah, so it's hard for me to tease apart this fear thing. You know, fear is partially, I mean, I tend to think some fear is genetically endowed and attached to certain physical events. Like, for example, what you just described, the unknown, uh, and or some large object moving towards you at a high rate of speed. Uh, but I think there's other fears that get associated, which are of a different kind. For example, you may fear what Putin's going to do, but that's not genetically endowed, right? And
Right. But isn't the other kind of fear, the one with the large objects or the fear of the unknown, isn't that also an emotion?
I don't know. I
Or
don't
would
know.
it be a simpler thing, maybe like a stimulus response? Maybe it's at a baser level, right? Maybe.
Yeah, this is something that I've never quite been able to tease apart what's going on with fear. So I don't have a good answer for you, but it's a very good question. Okay, Isabel, you get the last word, and then we're going to turn to term papers. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of the or at least like two to three emotions are like probably genetically encoded and everything else is sort of derived. Like, because like if we were to think about it from like stimulus like response collection system, there has to be some kind of like a positive emotion also that is probably genetically encoded somewhere too. Because we seem to agree a lot on like what feels good. And I feel like some of that is probably genetic.
You've triggered a thought with your thought. So now we're in research mode, right? Okay. That is, animals which apparently do not feel emotions still act as if they feel fear. Okay, so let me take an example. Uh, I doubt that well, uh, take a lizard. If a large moving object comes around a lizard, it runs away. And it's behaving as if it feared that object. Okay, that large moving object, or all large moving objects near it. It's behaving that way. Now, does it have an emotional reaction? I rather doubt that the uh, lizard feels fear in any sense that we would have it. I suspect he doesn't have the kind of brain that would allow them to do it, right? Okay. So, so if we accept that, why shouldn't we think, perhaps, that humans have retained that mechanism through evolution, that we also respond in a fearful fashion to just large moving objects. Now, but then the lizard never has a response to, doesn't have an emotional response to the prospects of not passing this course. But we do. So it that mumble sort of supports my intuition that we use fear for two different things. The word's used for two different things. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for that. Let's turn to another topic. We're going to return to this detour later. Okay. All right. So, term papers. We're going to talk about term papers. All right. So, in general, here's a statement worth.
I am interested in what Preen theory tells us, and less interested in what the news, Wikipedia, YouTube, or textbooks tell us. Your personal feelings and thoughts about things, other than as examples, are of little interest.
Right. So I'm not interested in, your thoughts on Putin per se, except as an example of something going on preen theoretically. Okay. And so I sort of thought a little bit about topics that might be good topics for a term paper. And I broke it up into preen theory and applied preen theory. Okay. So among the things in preen theory is what about languages? What is a language? How did it evolve? What purpose does it play? And are words preens? I don't know. I'm not sure how all that works. Yes, so that'd be good. We've also, as part of preen theory is roughly exploring, preen land, seeing what's there. Okay, would be non-human cultures. We've turned to that topic as a sort of open problem several times. And I think we've made progress, but I don't know, there's certainly much more to come to understand. Okay, topics under applied preen theory. Current events. Okay, Israeli-Palestinian war, US election, Ukrainian-Russian war. And I'm not interested in your personal feelings about any of those situations, or your personal thoughts, I should say, or feelings. What I'm interested in is more, what is the view from each side of the issues, and what is the view from preen theory? So we have these events that are current, and people have very strong feelings and thoughts about these events, and a description of their behavior in terms of preen theory, and then the view of those events from purely preen theory. That's a possible topic. Okay, another possible thing is economics. I think economics, for example, Adam Smith and everything, is very much related to preen theory, but it's a vague question, and I don't really know what I mean here. But I think there's much in economics is preen theory. Okay. Now here's another question that I think would be interesting. Are all people preen warriors for the societies to which they belong? Is every person just battling for the social, to save the cultural preens of the societies to which they belong? Is there, and further, if the answer to that is yes, they're all preen warriors, then what does it say? Is there such a thing as an unbiased journalist or an unbiased historian? Can there be? That'd be another interesting question. Are people anything else than preen warriors for the societies to which they belong? That is what's left after our behavior as preen warriors for the societies to which we belong and preen warriors for our genetic preens. What are we when that all that's taken out of the picture?
A similar thing may happen when good things occur. For example, if you encounter a person that you find physically attractive, the meme recorder may be turned on. The recording may include images, locations, and sensory sensations such as sounds. The new memes may later be processed to improve future behavior. For example, you may adjust your plans to increase the likelihood of encountering that person again. In both the lion and attraction cases, turning on the meme recorder is one of many actions your brain, or more generally your central nervous system, may initiate. For example, it is likely that in both cases, your pulse rate will rise and the chemistry in your brain will change.
Okay, so I'm sort of getting to that dopamine sort of view, but I don't know if it's actually dopamine or chemical changes in the brain that really, a certain level is what turns on the computer, but it could well be that. Yes. Okay.
What constellations of signals are likely to cause the brain to turn on the meme recorder? I would guess that evolution would have produced a brain with substantial proficiency in distinguishing between mundane situations, situations involving danger, and situations involving opportunity. Recording memes in the latter situations provides a means for designing future behavior to diminish those dangers or enhance those opportunities.
Okay, so I'm claiming the brain can probably has evolved to distinguish mundane situations from situations involving danger or situations involving opportunity. That this makes sense to me that the brain's probably got some way of distinguishing those sorts of situations. And probably the latter two kinds of situations, those that involve danger or involve opportunity, are likely, rather than mundane ones, to turn on the meme recorder. Okay. And why turn on the meme recorder? Because you'll later process what you've recorded to design a future to diminish the dangers you might have encountered and enhance the opportunities. Yes. So that's what I'm suggesting.
Cultural presets have learned to exploit these mechanisms by creating constellations of signals that cause the meme recorder to start and record memes they wish to embed. It is no accident that advertisers use physically attractive people to get you to remember their beer. The Catholic Church has used glorious music and wondrous art to achieve a similar effect. To a significant extent, Baroque art itself arose as a direct result of the Catholic Counter-Reformation's endorsement of art for the purpose of teaching Catholic cultural preens.
Okay, so the beer commercials uh, often have attractive people. Yes. Well, what that may be doing is making the event much more stimulating. It's no longer a mundane event watching this commercial. It's now more than that because of these attractive people, for example. And so it looks as if advertisers realize that, once you can excite a person, there's more likelihood that the meme recorder will go on. And it won't just record the exciting, attractive people. It will also record the other stuff, like the beer. Yes. Okay, so that's what I think. And yes, okay, so now the Catholic Church. So after the Reformation, there was a Counter-Reformation, and it had a lot to do with Baroque art because the Catholic Church had a meeting. I don't know which one this was, the Council of something, Trent. I don't think so, but anyway, uh, and they produced the Counter-Reformation where they explicitly said that, let's use art for the purpose of teaching Catholic cultural creeds. They didn't use the language of creeds, right? Because they realized this is a way to do it. And okay, so
Would a 17th century peasant ever forget the holiness of St. Ignatius after viewing Pozzo's breathtaking ceiling fresco?
so you're the 17th century peasant, and there's Saint Ignatius up there being taken to heaven, and you're standing on the floor of this church, and you see this. Presumably the only other things you see outside the church are huts or, farms and stuff, right? So this is designed to cause great stimulation, and you will learn it's advertising. Yes? Okay. Okay.
Importantly, while the genes have given us systems for recording memes, it appears they have not given the conscious part of our brains direct control of their removal. We cannot simply decide to forget our memories, just make them go away.
Okay, so this is the thing, you know, as far as I can see, you cannot just by your own volition say, "Oh, I don't want to have this meme anymore." It's not that as a computer science, we know you could have been given the ability by the robot could have the power to remove uh, things in their memory when they, quote, decided to do it. But it doesn't look like we have. So this is the idea that, can you unsee things, right? So if you've seen things that, are uh, upsetting images, for example, you might like to unsee them. Has anybody been successful at that? Okay. John?
Yes. So this is all making a lot of sense. I was just wondering, how would we treat the brain's sort of, I think we have a meta capacity, which is, so for example, we talked about trauma and the lion, but we also know that we can sometimes cure trauma, or even like when you think about very experienced practitioners of meditation, they are able to react differently to external stimulus, and they are even able to exert their volition in ways that I don't know. If you haven't gone through the training, I guess you can't. So I was just wondering how would that also fit in? I think there's like this meta capacity of the brain to direct the brain.
Yes, and that's a very important question, and I have thought about it. And we could ask not just about the monk or well, the meditator. I don't know if you use the word monk.
I was thinking about the monk.
Oh, okay. But we could ask that, but we could also ask, what happens when you go to a psychiatrist or psychologist because you're upset, right? You have a quote, mental disorder. Yes. The theory there is that you will be able to change your behavior by in entering into that process and your emotions, yes, and or your emotions. And so it seems to me that the monk's contemplations, meditation, and going to a therapist uh, are much related events. They're attempts to somehow deal with the things that you've stored in your brain. Now, we're going to say more about that. Okay, but given that uh, we don't have the ability to remove memes just by deciding to remove them. So if that's the case, and I believe it is, uh, then what is that monk actually doing? And what is the therapist actually doing? What can they do?
Maybe
I mean,
they're
yeah.
maybe it's like an append only function. We're adding memes and different and maybe more powerful memes. Yeah.
As usual, you're right on. I think that's exactly what we're doing. That is that what the monk is doing is adding new memes that will dictate behaviors and emotions to situations that are different than the ones that he wants to not have dictate his behavior. He can't make the old ones go away, and they'll still argue for the behavior they want, which the monk may not want. And but he can add new memes. Yes, um, and I think that that's very important for, uh, or perhaps maybe important for psychiatrists and psychologists to also understand. Now, I mean, there's sort of two types of therapy in rough terms that can be offered. Invasive therapy, you give someone surgery or you give them pills to change, to make them feel better, or talk therapy where you just talk to them. And what I'm suggesting is all that a talk therapist can do is add new memes. And that's what you sort of came to that same conclusion. And so it leads me to the question of what distinguishes what that monk's doing from what a therapist does, say cognitive behavioral therapy is one example, from what 12-step programs do, from what religious consultation, go talk to your, pastor or rabbi or mullah, I don't know, or just talking to friends and family. Are they fundamentally different, or are they all in the process of adding new memes to, quote, combat old memes that are distressing you? Okay. Anybody got anything to say about that? Because I think that that is something that's worth saying in psychiatry and psychology. Now, they may not think so, the psychiatrists and psychologists, but I think so. And so, all right, we're going to end it here, but there's a lot of possible implications here for psychology. Yes. And by the way, that could be another term paper. Yeah. All right. Well, as usual, it was a total pleasure for you and me. And so I will see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Bye.